today is all about building a foundation. So many of you are new to the CDBG program or relatively new. Today is a very important day for you, okay? Today is about building that foundation of knowledge to carry you forward when we get into detailed activity conversations, cross-cutting federal requirements, all those other things that you hear about with CDBG. Today is about understanding the context of CDBG and how those things apply and get integrated into CDBG. And so please ask questions as we go forward, specifically today, because today is important to make sure that you have a solid foundation going forward, okay? So to get started, we're going to talk about the history of the CDBG program, the primary objectives of the CDBG program. We're going to define some key terms associated with the CDBG program, and then we're going to get into some of the key roles and partners that you have to help you implement the CDBG program, okay? So to start us off, prior to 1974, when the CDBG program was created, there were 8 categorical community development type programs, okay? Each of these had their own separate rules and requirements, okay? So what CDBG in essence did was consolidated all these 8 programs into one program. So if you look at these 8, a lot of what you see there you can do and fund with CDBG. Right? Here's the difference about CDBG. Prior to CDBG, you had these 8 categorical programs. Planners at the federal level dictated how communities should spend those dollars. Okay? So it was a very top-down approach. So when these programs were consolidated into CDBG, what they said was, well, we want to put the emphasis on at the local level to determine how to spend those resources. Okay? So in essence, creating a bottom-up approach. You, the community, have a better idea of what's going on, where the needs exist. Data tells one part of the story, but there's also another part of that story of what's really going on. And so the CDBG was about having you determine how to spend those resources, okay? So a little bit more about the history of the CDBG program. The key takeaway from this slide, and I'm trying to use the pointer here, in 1975, in 2013 dollars, okay, so this has been adjusted for 2013 dollars, CDBG was valued out of basically $11 billion. Wow. Okay, $11 billion, and there were only about 600 CDBG grantees at that time. So if you track the blue line here over time, over the 43 years or so, now there's about 1,200 CDBG grantees. So CDBG grantees have doubled since 1975. Okay. If you track the red line here, what is that doing? It's going down. Okay. So you heard Rufus say earlier that the CR was passed, and now you have about $3 billion in CDBG allocated. So you can see from 1975 to today, the value of CDBG has gone down. Okay. Population and everything going up in most grantee in cities, so that's why you have more HUD grantees now that qualify for CDBG, and we'll talk about what that means later. So CDBG dollars going down, the number of grantees going up. Okay, so we get the question often, why are my CDBG dollars going up? That's why. Okay, more cities qualify, more communities qualify for CDBG. The level of CDBG allocated by Congress is going down, and that's why we have more grantees today than we did previously. Okay. Primary objectives of the CDBG program. Do these look familiar to you? Do you see these 3 primary objectives anywhere else? Someone said it. And where do you see them in IDIS? Okay. And where it is in your what? When you're developing your consolidated plan. Okay. So when Congress enacted CDBG, it stated that its primary purpose was to development of viable urban communities, principally for low to moderate income persons, through these 3 primary objectives: decent housing, suitable living environment, expanding economic opportunity. Okay? This is an actual picture of a CDBG assisted household. This little girl was homeless. Her mother received CDBG support to purchase a house, a foreclosed property, through Habitat for Humanity. And so if you think about that in the context of these three primary objectives, that is in essence the work that we do, right? Her household, her mother received support, was able to purchase a house, and now she's in a better, suitable living environment. She has a decent house, and because of that, has increased access to her opportunities, okay? So that's what we do. That's the purpose, the fundamental purpose of the CDBG program is to achieve outcomes like this, okay? As Rudy alluded to, and the 8 categorical programs showed, CDBG is an extremely flexible program, okay? A lot of things you think you want to fund with CDBG, you can fund. And as we'll show you throughout the training, it depends on how you qualify that activity, what national objective you choose, and how you document it, okay? You can most likely fund what you want to fund with CDBG, but you have to document it correctly, you have to choose the appropriate national objective, and you have to make sure you're choosing the appropriate eligible activity. And when we get into the context of eligible activities, we'll try and point out some of the nuances that say, hey, you could qualify it as this, but if you do, these are the requirements that apply. Or you could qualify it as this, maybe a little lighter requirements on this side. Okay, so we'll try and point out some of those nuances. CDBG regulations. Believe it or not, this is an actual photo of a shelf at someone's office and headquarters that have all the 43 years of the CDBG regulations on their shelf. But if you walk away with anything today, I think it's in that the regulations, while very important, only give you a part of what you need to know about the CDBG program. A very important part, but a part, okay? So as Rudy alluded to, you're going to receive a thumb drive that has a host of information on it, okay? We try to assemble some of the critical resources, guidebooks, whether we're talking about several recipients or economic development or sample housing programs, Section 108, that will be vital to you as you move through the program, some of the CPD notices that are important. And so while understanding the regs is extremely important, just relying on the regs may not give you the full picture to answer the questions that you have. Okay, so we're going to try and point out some of the nuances as we go through the program that might not be captured in the regulations, and we'll try and point you to the associated reference that will contain the information that you need. Okay? So since CDBG was enacted, there hasn't been a lot of statutory or rule changes associated with it. But there's been several over the past couple years that we're going to point out throughout the training, and you see some of them listed here. Okay, so we'll touch on a lot of these as we move forward with the training. Okay. So some key definitions before we get started. The entitlement program. Many of you are entitlement grantees. Okay, what's an entitlement grantee? There's two kinds of entitlement grantees. You're either a city or an urban county. Okay? Entitlement grantees from CDBG, roughly 70% of the CDBG allocation, so that $3 billion, gets allocated to entitlement grantees. Okay? Because you're an entitled grantee, does that mean you're entitled to your CDBG allocation? It does, but that doesn't mean you just receive it. And when we talk about the consolidated plan, we'll talk about the tool that you use to request that entitlement grant from HUD, which is your consolidated plan. We'll dig into that a little bit. But to qualify as an entitlement city, there's a population threshold. What's that threshold? 50,000. Okay, you have to have a population of 50,000. For urban county, what's that threshold? 200,000. Okay, so those are the thresholds to qualify as an entitlement jurisdiction under the CDBG program. We have some states here, so roughly about 30% of the CDBG, the $3 billion of CDBG goes to states. Okay, states operate a little differently than entitlements, as Rudy pointed out, and many of you that were here yesterday heard some of this. States have to fund units of general local government, UGLUGs. And so they don't administer programs directly. They fund it out to non-entitlement jurisdictions within the state. Okay? So a little bit of nuance there. You'll hear this term CDBG recipient, CDBG grantee. basically that means you receive a direct allocation from HUD, okay, whether you're state or entitlement. So you may hear Rudy or I use that terminology throughout the training. Your consolidated plan, okay, very important document. This is your 3 to 5 year strategy on how you're going to spend your entitlement funding. So if you receive home, CDBG, ESG, HOPWA, the consolidated plan is where you describe the needs, develop your strategies and priorities, and articulate your goals for your entitlement programs. How many homeowners you're going to assist, how many jobs you're going to create, how many communities you're going to serve, okay? Low to moderate income households, typically we're talking about for HUD programs, households earning at or below 80% of the area median income, okay? Household versus family, very important definition. Within CDBG, it has a lot of context that we'll unpack a little bit later. But when I say household, what am I talking about? In terms of household income, what am I talking about?
Everyone who has income, all the income.
Yes, well, everybody was right. Yes, all the persons occupying that housing unit, okay, whether they're related or not. Anybody in that household is the definition of household when we're talking about CDBG. In contrast, what is the definition of family? What is the family definition under CDBG?
All the members of the household but not income qualified.
Close. All persons living in that household related by birth, marriage, or adoption, okay, including foster care, okay? So we're going to point out the nuances of these definitions as we go throughout the training, but I wanted to kind of give you that background as we move forward, okay? All right. Sorry, yes?
Subrecipients and subgrantees. Can you give me what your...
We're going to unpack that definition in a little bit later. Yeah, but we'll cover that, yeah. Sorry. All right, some key roles in the CDBG program. Obviously, you as an entitlement jurisdiction, you can administer programs yourself, or you can work with a variety of partners, okay? Several of you have subrecipients. Some of you fund developers, or all of you fund developers. Some of you work with contractors, and most likely all of you support some type of beneficiary, okay? We're going to unpack what these means, but basically, the folks on this list here encompass the key partners that you're going to work with, as well as the key persons that you're going to serve through your CDBG funding. Okay, we're going to talk about these definitions and roles in a little bit. The key thing here is that different O&B rules apply to different partners. Okay, and we're going to kind of point out what those are as we move forward. So this is a graphic of kind of the typical money flow for CDBG. Again, if you're an entitlement, you receive your allocation directly from HUD. And as that entitlement jurisdiction, you can fund subrecipients, CBDOs, CDFIs, all of which we're going to define, contractors, and beneficiaries. You can fund those entities directly. So if you're an entitlement, you can fund a subrecipient directly. You could fund a contractor directly, or you can directly support a beneficiary. Okay? If you fund a subrecipient, and we're going to unpack this a little bit more, but that subrecipient can also fund contractors and directly fund beneficiaries. Okay? Here's the question. Where do developers sit in this chart? How many of you say they are a subrecipient? How many say they are a contractor? How many say they are a beneficiary? They are a beneficiary. Okay? They are receiving the money directly from you, okay? And they're hired to do a job, okay? Develop a housing project. Okay, we're going to unpack this a little bit, but just want to kind of ground you that developers sit in the beneficiary category, okay? But it's very important how you define the partner relationship that you have, because as we're going to show you, you can be a subrecipient or you could be a developer. Different rules apply to each. Different requirements apply to each. In some cases, it's better to call someone a subrecipient based on the activity they're performing for you. In some cases, you want to qualify them as a developer. Okay, so it's very important how you define that partner relationship. Okay. All right, this is basically kind of a snapshot of FY 2016 use of CDBG funds by entitlement grantees. Okay? So it's probably a little small on your slide, but I'll walk you through it. So basically, acquisition costs, CDBG grantees spent about 6.2% of their allocation on acquisition type activities. Okay? Administrative and planning, about 16.2%. Economic development, about 4.7%. Housing, 28%. Public services, 13%. Public improvements, 26.5%. What stands out to you? Does anything shock you or surprise you with this expenditure chart?
Economic development piece is so small.
Yeah, this one shocks me as well, and I'm sure there's reasons for that. Economic development activities under CDBG are a little more nuanced, a little more complex in terms of documentation and record keeping requirements, all those things, but a little shocking, especially given the state of the economy and kind of where things have gone from NSP to now, that is still about 4%. Okay. Anything else shock you? Give you a hint. Yeah. What's your percentage cap on planning and admin? 20%. So, on average, grantees aren't spending they're only spending 16% of their admin cap. Okay. I mean, I think the thing here is that as Congress looks at this and other folks look at this, they're like, oh, they only spend 16%. Maybe we should lower the cap. So obviously, we don't want to send that message, right? So we want to make sure that we're spending our dollars in a way that's useful to your community, but also sends the message that, hey, this money is being used. It's being used and it's being applied the way that Congress intended, and it's having an impact in your community. So whether that's economic development, public services, public improvements, we want to make sure we get the money out there to serve its purpose. Okay? So just to kind of give you some context on where the money goes, who gets the most. New York City, $151 million. Okay, largest CDBG grantee. Before you think, man, I wish I received $151 million. That's based on a formula, right? Population is a large count of that, but also need is a large count. So they get the most because they have a formula that dictates that they need the most. Okay, so it's all driven by formula. So nothing on here shocks you. These are large urban metropolitan areas, often have higher needs in them. And so this kind of give you an example of kind of how that money gets allocated to the 10 highest CDBG grantees. 10 smallest entitlements. Nobody's here from Fairhope, Alabama, are they? No? 66,000. Okay, so the question often comes up, what are you going to do with your $66,000 in CDBG funds? When you think about 20% is admin, so that's about $12 million. You have to write a comp plan, you got to do a single audit, you got to do all these things. But Fairhope could have easily said, you know what, I'm not going to submit our comp plan this year, we're not going to ask for the money. But they did. Okay, that shows you how important CDBG dollars are. Okay, they feel the need. Fairhope said, hey, we have a need. We could use that $66,000. We're going to make sure we fund our several public service entities or whatever they funded, homeowner rehab, whatever the case may be. But that money was needed and it was used. Okay, so they went through the effort of applying for it. Okay, so that's how important CDBG is. Even the smallest grantees need that money. Okay. So just kind of give you some stats here on what goes where. Average median size of the 2006 grantee was 1.7 million. Okay, it does not include states. The median was about 796,000, just for some context. State grantees, Texas, the highest CDBG grantee gets the most, 60 million, and then on down the line. Okay, So in terms of states, the average state grant size was 18 million, median was about 15 million. Okay. All right, so CDBG implementation steps. This graphic is not meant to capture everything that you guys do, okay? It's meant to kind of just give you an orientation to, one, what your requirements are at a high level, two, how those requirements flow through, and then three, how those things get reported out to HUD. And so if you break this image down into chunks, essentially what you have at the top here is your planning functions. You're determining your need, you're preparing your consolidated plan, determining what eligible activities you're going to pursue. In the middle is kind of your implementation processes, and then three, reporting through IDIS. Okay? Are all of you familiar with these kind of high-level steps? Okay. Anything here need explaining? Okay, we're going to unpack this in much more detail as we go forward. Okay.